Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 49 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits. But I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. Following up on last episode, where we looked at Marvel's international heroes, this time we're going to go over DC's non-American heroes. Like last time, I'm sticking to characters that come from non-fictional countries. So Black Adam from Kahndaq and Geoforce of Markovia are off the table. And we'll also be focusing on characters that primarily live in their country of origin and have not spent much of their superhero careers in the US. One other stipulation I will add is that I'm going to be almost entirely talking about characters that were created post-Crisis. If you watch the CW Arrowverse shows, you've become more familiar with what Crisis is, but if the term post-Crisis is new to you, be sure to go back to episode 1 of Welcome to Geektown. The reason I do this is that most of the foreign-born heroes we see in the DC universe before that point relied on stereotypes and don't present their countries in the best light. But we'll start our discussion with the rare exception to that last rule, which is the group known as the Batmen of All Nations. This group first appeared in Detective number 215. Although some of the individual members were introduced in earlier issues of Batman. Heroes who were inspired by the legend of Batman and decided to become crime fighters themselves, this collection included Knight and Squire from England, the Man of Bats of the Sioux Nation and his son/sidekick Little Raven, Wingman of Sweden, Argentina's Gaucho, the Musketeer of France, the Ranger hailing from Australia, and the Legionary of Italy. In pre-Crisis, this group is presented as a friendly federation that occasionally meets to learn from one another, and their outfits draw on well-known cultural touchstones, such as the Musketeer's traditional puffy-sleeved outfit, and the Legionary wearing a Roman centurion's armor. The Batmen of All Nations, later named the Club of Heroes, only appeared a couple of times in the pre-Crisis continuity. But writer Grant Morrison, a name that will come up a few more times in this episode, along with artist J.H. Williams III, brought the group back in a 2007 story. In that arc, we find out through a flashback that the group had fallen apart due to tragic circumstances, and that a few of the men had left their heroic life. In the modern-day portion of the story, some members of the former team have been murdered, and so the remaining heroes band back together to solve the mystery. It turns out that Wingman himself was the culprit. He's eventually defeated by Batman and El Gacho, although the true mastermind behind the plot, Dr. Hurt, continues on. Grant Morrison brought some of these characters back and invented new international heroes as well when he wrote the title Batman Incorporated. In this series, Bruce Wayne decides to train and equip heroes all over the world in order to continue his fight for justice, and direct their missions to a certain extent. Some of the returning characters in this new team include Knight and Squire, although by this point the original Knight had died and was replaced by the original Squire, who then took on his own sidekick, and El Gacho from the Club of Heroes, as well as other previously introduced characters like the Hood, another British Batman equivalent, and Black Bat stationed in Hong Kong. Actually, the Cassandra Cain Batgirl in a new costume. Check out episode 42 for more info on her. New characters include Mr. Unknown, a Batman-like character from Japan, and the Batman of Africa, specifically the Democratic Republic of Congo, Batwing. The original Batwing was David Zavimbe, a Congolese police officer, and he got his own series in 2011 when the New 52 rebooted the DC universe. Again, episode 1 will give you more info on that and other reboots DC has been through. However, just a couple of years later, David was replaced by Luke Fox, the son of Lucius Fox, the executive at Wayne Industries that helps Batman, best known from the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, where he's played by Morgan Freeman. Luke can currently be seen on the Batwoman TV show, where he acts as the man in the chair for Kate Kane. It's yet to be seen if he'll follow in his comic book counterpart's footsteps and become a crime fighter in his own right. Moving away from the various Batmen, we get to DC's first real team of international heroes, the Global Guardians. Created in 1982, yes, that's pre-crisis, but just barely so, and as you'll see, many of these characters last far beyond that. The team first appears in DC Comics Presents number 46, written by E. Nelson Bridwell and drawn by Alex Saviuk. Although their leader, Dr. Mist, came from the fictional ancient African kingdom of Kor, the rest of the team represented real countries, including Germany, Japan, South Africa, Denmark, Australia, and Israel, among many others. Other characters were recruited into the already large team, adding Indonesia, Canada, and France to the nations represented. Two notable members went on to greater fame, as Green Fury of Brazil and Ice Maiden of Norway later joined the Justice League, changing their names to Fire and Ice. The first Ice, whose real name was Tora Ulfsdotter, was actually the second Ice Maiden, as the first, Sigrid Nansen, had quit. Ironically, after Tora died, Sigrid came back and became the second Ice. The original Ice Maiden, or the second Ice, aka Sigrid, and fellow founding member Tasmanian Devil, from Australia naturally, add diversity to the team in another way, as both are open members of the LGBTQ community. Many of the members of the Global Guardians who did not join the Justice League were later seen as members of the International Ultramarine Corps, a team created by Grant Morrison featured in the DC 1 Million crossover, as well as the opening arc of the anthology title JLA Classified. This cynical team created their own free-floating city called Superbia and declared themselves independent of all countries, although the city was stationed above Montevideo in Uruguay. The Corps was last seen in a cameo in Final Crisis number 4, fighting and, unfortunately, losing to the forces of Darkseid. Fire and Ice were not the only international members of the Justice League. During Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis's legendary run on the title, there was both a Justice League America and a Justice League International, sometimes called Justice League Europe. The International/Europe team had a number of American characters, including the Flash and Elongated Man, but also included a few characters from outside North America, including Crimson Fox of France. A later version of Crimson Fox also joined the Global Guardians. Rocket Red, a Russian who was once part of a Soviet Union team of armored agents, and Dr. Light, a Japanese heroine, real name Kamiyo Hoshi, who got her powers during Crisis on Infinite Earths. Originally no relation to the villain bearing the same name, it was recently retconned to Kamiyo being the ex-wife of the original Dr. Light and mother of his 3 children. Pre-New 52, she was a single mother of 2 children, and her ex-husband was unnamed. This heroic, although antisocial, Dr. Light has been a member of a few incarnations of the Justice League over the years, and was also briefly a member of the Doom Patrol. She was also one of many female heroes invited to join the Birds of Prey over the years, although she declined the invitation from Oracle. Dr. Light isn't the only Japanese hero that DC has introduced. In addition to Rising Sun, one of the Global Guardian founders, Grant Morrison and artist J.G. Jones created a team of heroes called the Super Young Team. I put heroes in quotes because the members have gotten into very few real adventures, sticking to minor good deeds while trying to build their fame and reputation. These characters were likely inspired by Japanese idol singing groups like Momiro Clover Z and Morning Musume, and have names like Most Excellent Superbat, Shiny Happy Aquazon, and Well-Spoken Sonic Lightning Flash, which are likely direct translations of typical Japanese product names, if those products were superheroes. They played a small part in Final Crisis, and were the leads in the Aftermath series subtitled Dance, by Joe Casey and artist Chris Cross. Despite the fact that this miniseries ends with Most Excellent Superbat buying Japan, his power is that he is, quote, rich enough to do anything. The team has not been seen since then. A more serious super team from Asia was created by Grant Morrison and J.G. Jones, along with Joe Bennett, 2 years earlier, for the miniseries 52, one of my favorite DC stories of all time. Led by team leader General August in Iron, like Young Super Team, the characters were named in their native language, then translated to English. China's team of super functionaries, called the Great 10, is run by the Central Committee of the government, who rejects the term heroes as too prideful. And the team has to deal with bureaucracy just as much as they do with supervillains. In their very first mission, 3 of the team's members have to sit out the fight because they haven't completed the requisite paperwork yet. But when they do have all their files in order, the team is quite impressive. Some of the members get their powers from Durlin Technology, a shape-shifting alien race who apparently crashed a ship in China sometime in the past, allowing the government to reverse engineer its workings. While others have their origins rooted in Chinese folklore, like Ghost Fox Killer, who is an expert assassin who then has the power to control the ghosts of those she kills, and is accompanied by a lion made of living jade. Other members include Accomplished Perfect Physician, Celestial Archer, Immortal Man in Darkness, Mother of Champions, 7 Deadly Brothers, who is actually just one man but can split into 7 identical clones when in battle, Shaolin Robot, Socialist Red Guardsman, and Thundermind. We haven't seen a lot of the Chinese team since their first few appearances, but they did show up in the recent Doomsday Clock miniseries by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, which I'll talk about a little bit more in just a moment. So, We know they're still active in current continuity. Before we get into that Doomsday Clock story, though, there's one other international grouping I want to mention. In the 90s, DC annuals each year would be tied together with some sort of theme. One year, they were all Elseworlds tales, another it was Year 1 stories, and the final theme they had in 2000 was Planet DC. 8 different titles: Superman, Batman, Batgirl, Flash, Green Lantern, JLA, JSA, and Titans each took the opportunity to introduce at least one new character from a country outside the US into the DC universe. Flash's book introduced an entire team from Argentina called Super Malone. In Superman, 3 heroes from Mexico teamed up with the Man of Steel, while in the other books we got 1 hero each from India, England, Tunisia, Turkey, Greece, and Japan. The cover of each of these books included a globe in the background, with the country of origin highlighted in some way. Unfortunately, most of these characters have had few, if any, appearances after their first. One exception is Nemesis, who appeared in the JSA annual and showed up in a couple of issues of Wonder Woman, then about a dozen issues of JSA a couple of years later. Unfortunately, the Greek hero died at the end of the JSA storyline, so the Planet DC heroes have overall not fared well. While this isn't nearly all the international heroes DC claims, their foreign-born roster pales in comparison to the number of heroes operating in America. And, as I mentioned in the previous episode, DC decided to use this as a plot point in their semi-sequel to Watchmen that takes place in the regular DC universe, titled Doomsday Clock, which you'll note can also be initialed to DC. Originally talked about as a conspiracy theory, the Superman theory supposes that the reason so many superpowered characters exist in America is that the American government has been experimenting and/or funding research into creating superhumans, and that many of the heroes wandering around the US are the results of these experiments, despite the origins that we have seen in the comics. This is eventually revealed in the story to be at least partially true, with heroes like Firestorm, Metamorpho, and villains like Man-Bat, who has recently been trying to take a more heroic turn in the Justice League Dark series, come out of these experiments. As I mentioned when talking about the Great 10, they are part of China's response to this news, and are shown to now be the Great 20, with new members like Striker Z, Night Dragon, and Guanxi adding to their ranks as part of a new international arms race, where the weapons aren't missiles, but people. That series has just ended recently, and actually takes place a little bit ahead of the current continuity of the other titles DC is publishing at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see where this story goes in the future, and if it leads to yet more DC characters originating outside of the United States. I hope you've enjoyed this look at a few of the international heroes in the big 2 companies, as we've covered in this episode and the last. If there's anything you'd like to learn more about, or have a question or comment you'd like to send me, you can do so really easily. Just send me an email at welcometogeektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to www.welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click Submit a Question if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown and Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcometogeektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.